My name is Jeremiah Castañeda, and I am doing my literary analysis essay over Richard Wright's Black Boy. This is Richard Wright. Richard Wright was an African American author of sometimes controversial works, short stories, poems, and nonfiction. Richard Wright was born on September 4th, 1908 in Roxy, Mississippi. He was raised in a household with his grandma and his aunt, who pressed him to pray that he might find God. It was the same pressure that made him hostile towards religious solutions for everyday problems. In grade school, he was a class valedictorian. He didn't want to be an Uncle Tom, and he refused to read the principal's carefully written speech that wouldn't offend the white board members, and finally convinced them to let him add a compromised version of what he wrote. Probably one of his earlier works was first published at the age of 16. It was called The Voodoo of Hell's Half Acre. It was in a black newspaper that it was published. Wright often read other writers and studied their styles in order to further and expand his knowledge. By 1935, Wright completed his first novel, Cesspool, published as Laud Today. In 1945, his book, Black Boy, became an instant bestseller upon publication. Shortly after that, in 1946, Wright moved to France, where critics say he became separated or alienated from the American blacks, which also separated him from his emotional and psychological roots. The works that he began publishing lost the rigidness brought on by the younger black authors, which in turn made his works a little less glorified. Although his importance as a public literary and a political figure grew, his creative works declined. But being as that Black Boy was written a year before his move, it had heavy influence into the 50s. Black Boy is a reflective work which portrays one black man's search for self-actualization in a racist society and a work from his own eyes. It is almost a biographical work, but in turn not. It is also written in the eyes of every black male at the time. These are just some of his works which have been published. He wrote many novels, a few poetry, mainly haikus, and was very heavily swayed by political influences. In the 30s, he went consistently to a communist party in search for ties into the political party. It was this which set Richard's path for the future in becoming an internationalist and a political activist. Richard Wright is now deceased, but is still one of the most influential African American authors to have ever lived.